Hello and welcome to this UniTaster On Demand event today. My name is John Cheek. I'm here from UniTasterDays and my job is to introduce the event and introduce our speaker. And the speaker today is Brent Meheux, joining us from Solent University, Southampton. Brent is going to introduce university courses in graphic design, so likely going to be covering things like why you might want to consider a graphic design course, what to expect on the programme, maybe a few application tips and an overview of potential careers as well. With that, I'll pass things over to you, Brent.
My name's Brent Meheux. I'm actually a course leader in graphic design. I've worked in graphic design for many years. It's something I really enjoy. So I'm here to talk to you about graphic design. And one of the first things I'm going to cover with graphic design is what is graphic design. It might seem a simple question, but an awful lot of students actually say, well, what is it? What does it encompass? Well, it's not about being an art worker. Now, when we say art worker, we're talking about, well, we've all got access to computers. We've all got access to different computer programs, Microsoft Word, etc. And we can put different documents together. But you've got to know the difference between the two. An art worker is actually how I started off. It might be somebody as I did. I worked for a newspaper, in a national newspaper. So I was using the same font every single day. I had the same grids I was following every day, the same color guides, everything. So really, that's all I did. An art worker might also be somebody that works in a small print shop, just doing maybe business cards, letterheads every day. Graphic designer is something completely different. I love this expression from Edward Degas. It's about 100 years old. It isn't what you see, it is what you can make others see. That to me really sums up graphic design, what it's all about. If you ask the average person what 2 + 2 is, well, they'll say 4, but not to a graphic designer. Graphic designers see things completely differently. We see things visually. You know, for example, what font would it be? How would I arrange those two numbers? And for example, am I trying to give another message with what I'm doing? That's what graphic design is all about. And a lot of us know when we're out in the world, we see a lot of the output of graphic design straight away. For example, branding or logos as we know them. Graphic designers also work on something we call wayfinding. So that's what's going out in the real world around us, those signs that we follow from one place to another. We may even be, very famously, the pictograms, those little pictures you see at the Olympics that tell you where different sports are going to be. But graphic design is also out there in the commercial world, for example. It might well be not just the branding and the logos used, but also in the packaging design. All of that comes under graphic design. And it's growing massively as the world changes. The internet, everyone, when it first came out, everyone thought it was, oh, it'll be about web developers. But pretty soon, graphic designers were needed within the internet to actually use that sort of UX design, would say, user experience, to bring in all those things they know in graphic design to the moving world. So it's important when you study graphic design at any university that you must have a really good foundation in the basics. Everything about typography is taught to you at university within graphic design. We would expect graphic designers to create their own new fonts and own typography. But it's also not just about what you put on the page, images or typography, but it's the grids you use on the page. And when we say page, we're also talking about, as I say, the TV screens, film screens. It might well be an app or a web design. They all follow grids that as graphic designers, you need to understand these. So it's very important that wherever you study, you have a wide range of skills you're taught from different computer programs. For example, Adobe Creative Suite, Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator. They're standard. You've got to be an expert in all. And there's new programs coming in every day that are really adding to those transversable skills. You've got to understand about print, how print works. Photography. You'd be amazed how much you'll be immersed in photography and understanding how to actually not just take pictures, but how to edit pictures. And there's a lot of what you may think are very old-fashioned technologies that talk to you, how to print, how to create your own books. But only by creating your own books and magazines do you understand how paper really works. And only by printing do you understand how paper absorbs and reacts to ink. And the typography, putting small little bit of lead type together actually teaches you about things like leading, kerning, that's the spaces between letters or between lines of text. And all of this means that you bring something original to the table. This is screen printing used to actually create a magazine cover that's then scanned into a computer and used to print. It might well be you might immerse yourself in old-fashioned designs like wooden type, because every single time that is printed, it's going to be slightly different. Or you might actually find yourself working in the fashion industry, book cover design, or infographics, explaining how things work in a simple way. An infographic is something about getting information across without using lots and lots of words. This, for example, is a large piece of work where a student works out timetables for trains over a period of 24 hours and put that out in a document. Graphic design is also used out there in the real world in outdoor advertising, as we call it, but also maybe things like you wouldn't think of, like book design for children's work, or asemic writing, that's writing that doesn't really say anything, or even just your own personal sort of design. And it's also greatly influenced by how you use type within print. This project is all about different surfaces that somebody wanted to see how ink reacted with. And there's a lot of big names you might well work for. You'd be surprised, sort of Bacardi, exhibition posters. And you're looking at the way typography works on paper. Sometimes you print on such things as newsprint, and you know that if you print heavily, it'll show through, and maybe you use that effectively. Or maybe also graphic design is about things that you do, something we call intervention, things you do in the outside world. I told you about wayfinding, but maybe it's things you do in the outside world that make people react. As I say, it might well be about creating your own typography, or as we say, apps. So where could it lead to? Where could graphic design lead to? Well, 85% of students who study graphic design, after 6 months of leaving, are actually working within the industry. So the first thing straight away with graphic design to get across to you is it's very industry orientated. There's a set path that people follow. You could find yourself working for design consultancies, publishing industries, advertising agencies, multidisciplinary design groups, web design, app design, television, film and multimedia, or even freelance practice. That's working for yourself. It often follows a very distinct route when you leave university. You're looking straight away at the beginning of being a junior designer, someone who's very new. You're still expected through university to be very polished. Your computer skills will have to be excellent, as will certain things like your photography, your use of typography, the use of grid systems. They'll expect you to be encompassing a complete graphic designer, but you're very much a junior graphic designer. You might do that for 2, maybe 3, sometimes up to 5 years. Then you'd move into very much a middleweight designer, where you're instead of working as part of a small team where you are feeding into the team, you're now suddenly possibly in charge of a team, or you've got individual projects you're working on yourself right from beginning to end. Then a few more years down the road, you're more likely to become something called a senior designer, very much someone who has got a lot of experience, maybe possibly 8 to 10 years experience in the industry. And now all of a sudden, you know, it's going to be looking at much bigger projects. And these are very set, by the way, very set career routes that each have very set sort of career salary expectations. And then at the top, we often think of it as a creative director. That's somebody that may be in charge of a whole design team within maybe a large company, or it's a company of your own. So that tells you a little bit about the route. Let's talk about some of the people. What are the things they get up to? Oh, there's a studio Glut, by the way. These are 2 students, Johnny and Dines. Johnny and Alex, and they very much knew at university they wanted to run their own business. Now, as graphic designers, they came together, form their own creative agency, and now they do an awful lot of work, as you can see here, for Warner Brothers. They've worked across TV channels, etc. So they're very much always focused on running their own agency, and they now actually have other junior designers working for them. So from day one, they were looking at freelancing, going out into the real world for themselves. Or you've got someone like Andy Diprose. Now, he's the creative director of Wired magazine and the British Society of Magazine Editors Art Director of the Year. Now, art director is another term for creative director. You're very much at the top of his game within the magazine and the publishing industry. And in Andy's case, he left university, started as a junior designer, working on newspapers, worked up into magazines, moved between different magazines before he ended up at Wired, a very set career route. And then you've got something, you know, very much the other end of things. Mikkel here is actually a Norwegian ex-student of ours, a Norwegian student who set up Void. It's all about experiential in interactive design. Now, what is that? That's wayfinding. So everything that he's interested in is in the real world, but it uses light and motion in what he does. So that tells you a little bit about graphic design. But what do you need to get into the industry? Well, every university will have its set UCAS points, but what can I give you tips wise? Well, tips wise is this: every single university will want to see a portfolio of your work from you. They won't expect your work to be really finished or polished. That's their job. They're going to be teaching you how to use the computer programs, how to actually print things really well. What they're looking for is the creativity, the spark. If you've got a lot of work, for example, you've come from a very much photography background, try and make sure you get a few pieces of work in there that deal with type as well as advertising maybe, and vice versa. If you've done lots of work in branding, make sure there's some other work in there that maybe is photographic based. Don't be worried about putting sketches in or little scamps, as we call it. That's something that really people want to see. The portfolio is something that you at an interview will be expected to talk about. So it'd been fantastic to carry along sketchbooks as well, where you had your ideas, how they came together for the projects you did maybe at college or at school. And it's just really a talking point. How much do you take? Well, every single university will be slightly different. They will put out criteria to say that maybe they just want 10 pieces of work, very good, and a couple of sketchbooks. Others will turn around and say, please bring whatever you want to an interview. And be aware that an awful lot of them want this to be digital. So do not be worried that if you've got lots of sketchbooks, you can always use your phone to actually film the sketchbook as you flick through it, and even talk about your work if you want to. In every case, they're also going to look for a statement from you explaining why you want to go into graphic design. And if I was you, I'd take your time to actually really look at graphic design, some of the famous graphic designers that are out there. Search on the internet, find out what graphic design is really about. I've given you a little bit of a taster today, but you need to craft a statement that states why you want to come into graphic design. I hope that helps. And I've really enjoyed actually talking to you about graphic design. I love the subject, and best of luck in the future.